Hey there, how are you?
Hey, Bob, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this. I I appreciate it. It's kind of nostalgic. Like I said, I grew up watching you all the time, so it's like, holy shit, this guy's in front of me, and I get to speak to him. So
And here we are, a couple of big old grown-up men now.
exactly. So
You know deep inside it's killing me. Close your eyes and hope to see, but you might be the death of me, the very last breath of me. And still I hold on to those ways.
all right, guys, welcome to the Deep Inside podcast. It's Mike Sammer here, and today's guest is somebody I grew up watching. You may have recognized the toaster trailer on the Food Network. He's a chef. He's a world record holder, and actually learned a couple other things. He's actually an artist. In 2020, redesigned all the public spaces and fabricated many pieces of sculptures for the Shelter Hotel in LA. He does a lot of things here in Toronto as well. Without further ado, Bob Blumer.
Hey, nice to be with you, Michael.
Thanks for coming on. I definitely appreciate it. So, Montreal, Quebec born, which I didn't realize. I didn't realize that you were born in Quebec. So, a little bit about your childhood, like parents, siblings. How did that all start off?
Should I be lying down for this?
Yeah, I guess I should. I've had that comment happen a couple times with guests. Oh my God, you're gonna make me cry today. I'm like, oh, geez.
You grew up in the West Island of Montreal in a kind of Leave It to Beaver kind of environment, and had two loving parents. Pretty typical upbringing from back in those days. When I look back on it, it seems pretty old-fashioned, but it was a pretty typical environment. One thing I take away from my childhood is that my mother always sent me to extracurricular art classes for my whole life, from the time I was, in the early grades. And every year it would be something different. It would be a pottery class or a batik class or a stained glass window class or something that went on for 6 months, and then she would change it up. And even though people refer to me as a chef, I think of myself as an artist, and food is one of the mediums that I use, and I use all sorts of other mediums, and basically most things I do are mixed medium. And so that's what I can trace back to my childhood, is all those different influences I had from all the art classes, and being comfortable around so many different things, so that when I want to make something or paint something, I have a lot to fall back on. And truthfully, I think of cooking the same way I think of making art, which is that you have, if you have paints, if you have a tube of blue paint and a tube of yellow paint, and you close your eyes, you pretty well know you're going to get green by mixing them together. And so in the food world, when you have various ingredients set out in front of you, if you have a natural aptitude for cooking, you can kind of imagine in your mouth how things will taste. And just to finish that whole thought, when I say an aptitude, I think that, we're all born with different aptitudes. If you put a gun to my head, I would not be able to change the oil in my car, or basically tell you anything about how my computer works, or how to, fix any problem on the computer. So we all have things that we come to naturally, and things that are very foreign to us.
Which is awesome. And yeah, when I was looking over your biography, I have to admit, I didn't realize the artist aspect of it. Like, you're huge into the art, and I didn't realize that came before the whole cooking aspect, which is, I thought maybe you came up, brought up in a cooking family or something along those lines. But from what you're telling me, it was more of the art aspect that created the imagination through this all. And then
Yeah, that's true. Although there is, just lying back again on the couch, there's one thing. It's funny, for most of my adult life, when people ask me if what my early cooking influences were, I used to talk about what a terrible cook my mother was, because she did I did grow up thinking that chocolate chip cookies were supposed to have black bottoms. Um, but the truth is, and according to friends of hers who I only extracted this information from in recent years, my mother was a very adventurous cook, but I was such a picky eater that I basically lived on shake and bake chicken and my own, because I taught myself how to make lettuce and tomato, iceberg lettuce and tomato sandwiches on white toast, which I lived on from like the age of 10 to 15. But I was such a picky eater. I didn't eat my mother's, her adventurous cooking, and really wasn't even aware of it. But she was making things like curries and sort of, Indian curries, Moroccan dishes, things like that, way ahead of her time.
Wow.
I just was oblivious to it.
And okay, so then when did that start to become an interest? I mean, did you start to get into the cooking later in your teens, early 20s? Was it more of the art that led you into it? Or, how did you fumble into the actual cooking aspect?
Fumble being the operative word.
It seems that way because it was all about
well,
art, which, and if you watch
yeah.
some of your old stuff, and I've watched some of this, you were very, and now that you mention art about it, your cooking was very appealing to the eyes when you cooked. And you can actually, now that I can associate the art aspect of how you cooked in that, toaster mobile, you started looking at it, it's like, yeah, I can see where the art's coming into this. So I just
the toaster mobile, the toaster mobile, if you think about it, is just it's a giant Klaus Oldenburg ripoff, right? It's, Klaus Oldenburg doing these famous big things, and that's what the toaster mobile was, just this giant rolling piece of art that I could cook in. But I learned how to cook for two reasons. One is that I grew up in a comfortable middle class family, but never when I went off my own, which I did when I was 18. I went to college and never came home. I visited, just for the record, but I never moved back home. And so cooking was a way of elevating my quality of life.
Okay.
And it allowed me to, as I taught myself how to cook, it allowed me to, live beyond my means. And I never lived on, McDonald's hamburgers and stuff like that. I mean, my repertoire was pretty minimal in the early days, but for example, a buddy of mine at college had worked in a restaurant where they made tableside Caesar salads. And he gave me a tutorial one day, and I've been making Caesar salads for 40 odd years now. So it was a combination of wanting to elevate my quality of life and then quickly realizing that it was a great way to get a date, or get a date and be able to cook for them without them realizing you couldn't take them to a restaurant because you couldn't afford it.
Fair enough. So then I'm assuming as that progressed and that as evolution happened, we'll go back to, the curries your mom used to cook. Did your, palate start to expand? Did you start to now fall into the, the world of cooking and say, oh my gosh, look at all these? I'm sure you started to now finger out as far as flavors and, countries of different cooking aspects. Did you start to go through that aspect as you started doing that?
Yes, but it was a slow burn. I mean,
Okay.
if we're talking about when I was in college, and I'm just, 18 or 19 or whatever. Yeah. I started by just discovering that, hey, broccoli actually tastes good, stuff like that. And it's only because I'm as old as I am now that over time and with experience and meeting as many people as I've met in my travels and having traveled to as many places as I've traveled, I've been to over 50 countries in my day, and many of them multiple times. I've been exposed to a lot of different styles of cooking, a lot of different flavors and spices and all, ingredients of all kinds. And when I finally, opened myself up to it and decided that I wanted to do this, then I really got excited and interested about it. But in the beginning, before, like I managed singers. I was a rock manager back in the early days.
Oh wow!
And
I didn't know that.
And I did that for first 13 years after I graduated from college. But 6 years into that, I wrote a cookbook as a pet project, and it slowly evolved into my accidental career.
So let's get into the accidental crew then. How did the very first gig, so to call it, was the Surreal Gourmet?
No. It goes way back before that. So, well, yes, but not the TV show,
Okay,
the book. So
fair enough.
the backstory is that when my kid's sister went off to college and moved into her first apartment that was her own, uh, I decided to make her a little gift. And as I was always brought up to do, I would make things, never really bought things. And so I cobbled together this scrapbook for her, which I called Bob's Bachelor Basics. And in it, I put, at the time, probably the 6 things I knew how to make well. So my Caesar salad and like a few other things. So if you want to do the math on that, my sister's 7 years younger than I am. And if she was moving into her first apartment, let's say she was 20. So I'm 27 years old. I still only know how to make 6 things well.
A 6-course meal at the very least, which is fine.
Yeah, but I mean, I had 6 specialties, shall we say.
Yeah.
And then I put in, just various things about living on your own. I always keep a 6-pack of beer in the fridge to entertain, or whatever it was. And I called it Bob's Bachelor Basics. I gave it to her. And then flash forward a few years later, I'd moved from Toronto to Los Angeles, managing the singer I was managing, who got signed to Warner Brothers Records. And I'm having dinner with this woman who I was, it was probably a date or a first date or something like that. Anyways, I don't know if it was the food or the wine talking, and I was bemoaning the fact that I couldn't afford my mortgage because I was making 10% of not very much, or 20%, sorry, of not very much. You're in real estate, math, know that 20% of not very much isn't much more than 10% of not very much. And she said, you should write a cookbook. And, harebrained schemes are a dime a dozen, but for some reason that just resonated with me. And I said to myself, I'm going to write a cookbook. And so I sat down and I created this proposal, and I couldn't afford a photographer to shoot the food for the proposal. So I illustrated it with my own illustrations that were inspired by my favorite surreal artists, those being Salvador Dali and Rene Magritte. And then I decided to call myself the Surreal Gourmet because the illustrations were surreal. The recipes were pretty, that was like it was my bachelor cuisine. It was an extension of what was in my sister's book or scrapbook, and everything else was kind of an expansion on what I had talked about for my sister in the scrapbook. And then I created, because I was in the music business, I thought, hey, I'm going to put music to cook by, and I'll have an album to cook for every dish, and the thesis being that you should be able to finish cooking before the record is up. So that's 40 minutes on an old school album, vinyl album. Everybody knows vinyl, but not because they're old. It's just because vinyl is new again. Then I tricked the publisher into letting me come into their office. I couldn't get an agent. Nobody would return my calls, but I tricked this publisher who was like a friend of a cousin of an uncle of a sister. And it was Chronicle Books. And I tricked them into letting me see them. And then they offered me this tiny little deal for the book. And then I locked myself away and wrote it, and it came out and it was immediately reviewed by the New York Times. And I was invited onto the Today Show. And then I had to learn how to cook.
It held your feet to the fire. I guess you had to put up or shut up. So wow, that's pretty amazing. So you just did this.
So kids, if you're thinking about getting into the food business, just follow that simple path, and you too can have your own TV show and your own cookbooks.
I mean, you must look back on it and think like, holy shit, like the sequence of these events, how they took place, and just how you took a chance, and it's just led you on a trajectory that I'm sure you look back and say it's pretty amazing.
Well, I've been incredibly fortunate. I think sometimes there were a few key things that when I jokingly say follow this path, but there's a few important decisions everyone has to make at certain points in their life. And one of them is define your currency, right? So a guy like you, big successful guy in the real estate industry,
Thanks, Bob.
you my guess, without knowing you for longer than the duration of this conversation so far, you are, I'm guessing, are very successful in the real estate business. You're very self-confident, good looking. You get out there, you sell what kind of properties do you sell?
Residential homes. House.
Okay. So then you make scoodles of money and you go off and you do the things you like to do, right? Is that a fair assessment of what you do?
Pretty much.
And then in your spare time, you do things like this podcast that allow you to scratch that creative itch of yours.
100%. Definitely.
Okay.
That's what keeps me going, is that creative aspect, right? So
got it. But the currency you defined was, I want to make real cash dollars, and maybe you have obligations that you have to fulfill and you need those cash dollars. When I was young and foolish, not that I regret it, but I just thought, I don't really care if I make any money as long as I can eat and pay my rent. For me, the currency that I'm interested in is the currency of adventure and life. And I was young, I wasn't married, I didn't have a family. And so I had the luxury of deciding that. Yeah. And believe me, I had my share of hard knocks, and I got beaten up a lot, not physically, but I got beaten up a lot when I did cobble together some money to buy a house, and went in half and half. I went in partners with someone on the house, and then borrowed money from everyone else I knew for my half. And even at that, I spent almost a decade being house poor and spending, what's the rule, 25% of your income on your, I was probably spending 80 to 85% of my income on my mortgage, and I was very house poor, but I was still happy. And I did what I needed to do to pursue my goals, which weren't even really that established. Like, I didn't have a 5-year plan. I just knew I wanted to follow my muse. Anyways, doesn't come without its cost, and it's not, you do get kicked around a lot, but I don't have any regrets.
Well, I wouldn't imagine you did, but it's
except for not kissing that girl in grade 12 when she offered to kiss me. I mean, I say grade 12, I mean when I was 12.
You just said no, or
I can't remember.
That's pretty amazing. And I think the artist
my only regret in life.
That's your only regret. The artist's life is led by, like you said, your muse, like that passion which has led you. So you did the book. I want to kind of get into, okay, like, now how the hell did you get a TV show out of this? So you did a cookbook, you sent it, you got it published. How did that now snowball? You're in LA, you're still
okay. But let's look at the timeline here.
Fair enough.
So that was
27, you said.
I went, it was my 33rd birthday when I flew up to the book publishers on my 33rd birthday.
Okay, fair enough.
So there's some years, because I was managing Jane Sibrey, the singer that I managed, and I was here. And anyways, my 33rd birthday, I flew up to San Francisco, and then eventually was offered a deal. I then put out a second book. So my first book was called The Surreal Gourmet. My second book was called The Surreal Gourmet Entertains.
Yep.
No TV shows, pitched a bunch of shows, never got it.
Okay.
Put out a third book. And when I say put out, this is like a year of writing and illustrating and creating art and everything for a book. Third book called Off the Eaten Path. Okay. Still no TV show to have as a platform. Knowing that I didn't have a platform, I thought, well, I'm going to try and make some noise. I'm going to be, kind of entrepreneurial about this. So I had been doing things in the food space. And so I raised $250,000 from all the different companies that I'd done various things with.
Wow.
I bought the shell of an Airstream trailer from the Airstream company. I tricked it out with, and by the way, that's $250,000 in $1999.
Which is,
and I tricked it out with like a $60,000 kitchen on the inside. And this is 5 years before anybody had food trucks. This is 5 years before Roy Choi created.
Yep. Yeah, it is food trucks. Yep.
And then I hired a crew of 3 people, and I did a 30,000 kilometer, 3-month-long rock and roll style tour around North America, doing TV shows, like morning shows, afternoon book signings, kamikaze dinner parties for media and stuff like that at night. And by the way, not all of these were that well attended, because I wasn't really that well known. There was no internet at the time, thank you very much. Barely a cell phone. And it had its moments. I was on CNN, I was in People magazine, but I would go to bookstore signings and like there'd be one person in line and I go, hey, didn't I just see you unboxing books when I came through the back of the store? And so, it had its ups and its downs. And at the end of the tour, 3 months later, I was nearly killed myself just from being, like I was running the show as well as being front of house. But I tried to sell the Toastermobile on eBay in the early days. No one was interested. And
I would have bought it, damn it.
Except my girlfriend at the time, who put in like a starting bid, and then it was the only bid.
Just to get it going.
I can't remember how we got out of that one. But then I got together with the producer and we pitched this concept to the Food Network, the nascent, just emerging Canadian Food Network, to do a show based on these sort of rock and roll dinner parties that I was doing. And that's how I got my first deal eventually. And then I did 5 seasons of that, and then 5 seasons of Glutton for Punishment, and then 2 seasons of World's Weirdest Restaurants.
Okay, yeah. Well, we're gonna get into that. So I want to just go back. Like, so what was it in you that said, I need to raise money, I need to buy this? Like, that's a huge, that was that. I think that was the pivotal moment where you either had that, you went all in at that point, did you not?
I mean,
you didn't think of it that way.
And I wasn't using my own money because I didn't have any, because I was still house poor. But I was just like, it was just all in with the spirit of it. And it was kind of like, I got to make this happen. I got to make shit happen somehow. And I'd say if you wanted to sum up, if you want to, just record this and then stick it at the end of our conversation, okay? If you want to sum up everything that I do, it's A, I do my best to make shit happen. And B, when it doesn't happen or when somebody puts up a roadblock, I either go around them, underneath them, over them, or through them. And like there's kind of no, I have been stopped in my day.
But no, nothing's going to get in your way, basically.
There's kind of no stopping me.
Yeah, which is fine. So, and you knew that going into that, that was your mindset when you did that? You got the trailer, you got the 3 guys, you went around.
It's my mindset. It's my mindset when I do everything.
It is.
It's my mindset.
Fair enough, which is awesome. Which is the reason people succeed is because they don't realize it's that mindset, right?
It's kind of a rock
option to fail.
Right. And it's also a rock manager mindset. And the truth is you always fail. I mean, there has to be room for failure, and no one bats 1,000, right? In baseball, the best batters bat 350. So that's 3.5 out of 10 times they get on base. Yep. They're the best. So, but in the world of being a rock manager, it's like the show's got to go on. You got to make stuff happen. And you do whatever you need to do to fix the situation when it's, going off the rails. And do you get it perfect all the time? No, but your general attitude is one way or another, I'm going to make this work. Right.
And when you quit, it's over. That's when you failed, is when you quit. And what you did is you said, screw it. I'm not quitting. I'll just find another way to do it. I'll figure a way out, but there's no way this is going to stop me from moving forward somehow.
Right.
Which is amazing. Okay, so you did that. I remember as a kid, and I remember telling you this, I used to watch that show. I used to love it for whatever reason. It was entertaining. You would be cooking in this trailer. You'd have and I remember the one of the baseball, for whatever reason. You had a baseball player cook. You always have someone cooking with you. At the end of it, you came out and everyone kind of ate with you. For whatever reason, it was entertaining. I would watch it over every time it was on as a kid, as a young adult and stuff like that. And then you went on to Glutton for Punishment.
Correct.
Which is totally something different.
Correct. The Food Network made me, despite the fact that I had what was a relatively successful show on the Food Network, they made me, totally audition for that new show because they didn't have any faith that I would be able to transition from what's affectionately known as a dump and stir cooking show to action adventure competition show.
Okay, and you did that. Was that something you wanted to do? You were forced into it? I know you said you auditioned for it. Would you want?
No. When I say audition, I mean it was my show. I created it with my friend Ainsley Vogel, but we had to do a pilot and jump through a bunch of hoops.
Okay.
And no, it was totally it was like, the Toastermobile ran out of steam after 5 seasons, which is pretty well as much as you get out of any one show. and it was like, what do I want to do next? Well, I'm a competitive guy and I love food and I love travel. So let's create a show that revolves around competition, food, and traveling.
So was the anticipation to break Guinness World Records? Was that what did
No,
you
no,
really
no,
want to
no.
do that?
No. That came about in season 3 and then season 5. So the backstory is my good friend Ainsley Vogel, who was working for the production company that she was working for a production company, and we sat down one night, polished off the better part of a bottle of single malt scotch, and created the idea of the show Glutton for Punishment, including the title, which I had used for a story about running the Medoc Marathon, which is this wine-drenched marathon in Bordeaux that we eventually I reran for on the show. And then we dreamed up all these different adventures, many of which were based on things I'd already done. And wrote that all down on a napkin before we probably passed out. And 7 of the first season's 13 episodes were actually on that napkin, which I unfortunately threw out. But
I find all the good ideas are written on napkins.
Yeah, as one does with a napkin when they wake up the next day and are cleaning up. So no, they were competitions. The first one, the pilot that we did for the show was I learned how to shuck oysters, and then entered a professional oyster shucking competition. Did the Medoc Marathon, did the cheese rolling competition, like things we'd heard a lot of things about. And then season 3, we decided we were going to we would try and break a food-related Guinness World Record, and so we chose the pancake flipping episode. And then season 4, we said to the Food Network, hey, we'd like to do some more of these things, and more Guinness World Records. We thought it was great, it worked out really well. And they go, no, you did it already, it's been done. Anyways, then we pitched some other show and they didn't want to do that. And then they came back to us and said, we've got this genius idea. Why don't you do a whole season of trying to break food-related Guinness World Records? And so
that was right up your alley.
So then we said yes, and of course I was afraid I was going to get skunked and go 0 for 6.
But didn't.
It turned out slightly differently.
No, it did. Yeah, you hold world records for a few things actually, right?
Well, I broke all 6 of them. Yes.
There you go.
That I attempted. So I'm in for 8 Guinness World Records at this point.
Amazing. Wow, that's pretty astonishing. Now, what was the hardest one in your opinion out of all those? Or whether you got the record or not, what was one of the challenges that you think, oh shit, I would never do that one again?
Well, they were all pretty challenging. The fastest time to peel 50 pounds of onions, where you have to wield a razor sharp knife with wild abandon.
And you cut yourself.
I cut myself and burn myself all the time. That's just another day in the office. But that record had stood for 30 years, so that was a pretty tough one. But they were all tough in their own way. As I say, I thought I was going to go 0 for 6, but I ended up going 6 for 6.
Were you surprised by that?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But you see, I have pig-headed determination, going back to what we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
So, that's that. And also, I use, the thing about these Guinness challenges is that there are certain rules that are created, and then you have certain leeway. And so I was very creative about how I approached, how I dissected what was required.
So it was a strategy.
The big time strategy.
Yeah. Okay, it's not just go blind in. You obviously had a strategy and all that stuff, which was,
I think, I can't remember.
Sorry,
I can't remember the number, but I think it's like 10% of the people who try and break a Guinness World Record succeed.
Wow.
It's not always as easy as it looks.
So the recurring theme is that you're bullheaded and you won't give up and you'll keep on going, and that's attributed to, I think, your success at the end of it. No,
I suppose so.
I think so. Which is awesome. And then you did, which I loved watching, the Weirdest Restaurant Show. I found that to be fascinating. You went around and there was some really weird shit that you did, which was interesting. It's obviously cultural driven to certain degrees, but that one was, how did that come about? Was that another napkin idea?
That was thought up by somebody at the production office, and I thought, hey, I like that idea. And that was just a way to keep traveling around the world and keep the
It
keep the
looked like
empire
fun.
of keep the empire afloat. But it was, there were two kinds of restaurants. There were so they're all weird restaurants, and they could be weird in any way as long as it was just weird.
Yeah.
And it had to be usually more than one note of weirdness, because
Yeah.
it had to sustain a third of a half-hour show, so 7 minutes. You can't just have one guy in a costume and that's it.
Yeah.
But there were two kinds of restaurants. One was the sort of more corporate style. So in Japan, for example, there are several chains that have everything from restaurants that are Cinderella themed to Alice in Wonderland to an asylum.
The airplane inside the airplane one you did, I think.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
those are all more corporate-y. And then you had these ma and pa restaurants with people who were truly eccentric and doing it, just because they couldn't stop themselves from doing it. And those were the most fun.
Which
For
one was
sure.
which one was the weirdest out of your in your opinion?
Well, you can't. Well,
Was it the monkey one?
I was going to say my first reaction was the toilet restaurant in
Yes.
Modern Toilet in Taiwan, where you eat curry out of toilet bowls. But the truth is, the moment you get past it, you realize the curry is pretty damn good. So it wasn't that hard. But the monkey one, so it's a small izakaya just outside of Tokyo, and they have beer serving monkeys. The food was really good.
It was,
but monkeys bring you your beer, and so beer and monkeys, what could go wrong?
Which is awesome.
How could you not love it?
Of course, beer and monkeys, and good as long as the food is good, which seems to be the underlying theme for all these, which is surprising when you really think of it. So
well, no. You see, here's the thing about the weird restaurants. Not a lot of the food was really great.
Oh, okay.
If you watch me eat like a rib and I talk about how juicy and delicious it is, and you see my nose start to grow, you know that it's really the driest, least interesting rib I've ever eaten, but I'm doing my best to be charitable.
That's hilarious. What is the one piece of advice that you can give somebody moving forward, going through life, wanting to succeed? What's the one piece that you would say to them?
Well, definitely define your currency. Don't listen to your parents.
Okay.
Seriously.
Yep.
They
put limiting beliefs on you. You believe that?
Oh, no, I don't think parents put limiting beliefs on you, but I think they encourage you to do things that either they wanted to do themselves or they think are right for you.
Okay.
Everybody I know who works in the creative world, be they fine artists, musicians, dancers, whatever, I think they're the happiest people that I know, and because they're following their muse. And it's not the only way to do it, but let's put it this way: if you're a young person and you have this dream of doing something, for the love of God, do it. I mean, sure, there should be a cutoff. If you get to 30 and you haven't succeeded in that arena, then maybe it's time to think about the fallback job. But don't not try what your dream is just because there are naysayers or people who believe that it's impossible to succeed in that world. I mean, for no other reason than I'm living proof that you can decide to write a cookbook and then end up having a television show in the food space with absolutely zero, in case we didn't mention this, zero culinary training. And
so did you ever get culinary training? Was it just learning on the spot? Like, I mean, now as you've gone through, I know we didn't go through this, but yeah, you wrote this book, you can cook only a few things. Was there ever a time during that process you said, shit, I need to kind of go for some lessons or go to a culinary studio just to kind of understand things? Or was it all learning on the fly?
The first cookbook I ever owned was the one I wrote. And the only culinary schools I've ever been in are the ones I've, done demos at.
Wow.
But I mean, I learn in lots of different ways, right? Yeah. I mean, I cook alongside a lot of chefs. I've done a a fair number of what are called stages.
Okay.
You would understand that because you speak French or a modicum of French. A stage is like a stage. It's a French
Okay.
word for stage. And you go into a restaurant. So say you have a favorite restaurant. You're sort of, I mean, in conventional times, you have a favorite restaurant you go to and you want to learn to improve your cooking chops. I always suggest that people go talk to the chef, the owner, the maitre d', the whoever, and say, listen, I'd love to come in here on weekends, or I've got a few days of vacation coming up. Can I just come in and I'll slice and dice, do whatever you need me to do, sweep the floors. And in exchange, you get to see everything that's going on around and, pick up tips. And as long as you show any modicum of interest, which is the reason you're there, so of course you will, chefs will come over and let you taste things. You'll be peeling potatoes, but you're going to see them assembling things, and you learn a lot. I've learned things from every restaurant I've ever done, 3 or 4 day stages at, and it's a great sort of crash course. And also, if you were thinking of going into the food world and you're not sure, it's a great way to either go all in or get it out of your system.
Yeah, I think osmosis, right? You're learning from it. I mean, you want to
Totally.
be around the best. That's just how you'll probably learn, which is amazing. You took an initiative to do that, right?
Oh, it's just what one does. But
Yeah.
yeah, and so I do that like everywhere I go. I'm learning from the people that I'm around. I see things. I see how someone, I walked into a kitchen when I was just a punk, and I saw a chef slicing an onion, and just the way you slice an onion, which is, you cut it in half, you put the flat side down, you cut crosswise.
Yep.
But I saw that once. That's all I needed to know.
Yeah.
And then I knew how to do it. And so like that times a million things that I've experienced in the 35 years that I've been doing this.
Well, it's definitely across the board. No matter what you've done, you've immersed yourself in it. You've partnered up, you've learned from it, you've immersed yourself in that environment to succeed. And I think no matter whether it was cooking, whether it was, doing the bike in France, the bike race, whatever you've done, it seems that you've immersed yourself in it. And that's really how you succeeded through the time. It wasn't really on your own. I'm not giving you any credit, but you surrounded yourself.
I'm only as good as the people I'm learning from. But in for a penny, in for a pound.
Fair enough. Yeah, definitely. And then this whole art stuff, we'll touch briefly on it, but you did some stuff at the Gladstone here in Toronto. You did the stuff in Napa Valley. I didn't realize, I guess that precedes the cooking when you were a kid, is that art thing has always been a sparkle in Bob Blumer, no matter what, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, for sure. If you can see it behind me, that's a longhorn cow with a longhorn
lobster or a crab.
Yeah, Alaskan king crab horns. I made that at the beginning of the pandemic just to amuse myself.
The best of both worlds, beef and seafood.
There you go, surf and turf, baby.
Surf and turf, so awesome. So what's next for you? What do you have in the hopper? What are you doing next? What do you keeping yourself occupied? Is there anything else coming out?
Well, my last book, Flavor Bomb, came out last fall, and obviously came out with a whimper based on the pandemic. But I'm a regular on several, a couple of Canadian shows, the CTV Morning News and Marilyn Dennis show. So I do those monthly remotely. I'm really lucky that I've had such an interesting career, and now I have various opportunities, to give back and do what one should do when they've spent a lifetime sucking information out of people, and that is to turn around and start giving it back. So I have the good fortune of being an ambassador for Second Harvest in Canada, as well as a Canadian zero waste initiative called Love Food, Hate Waste. And in November, I'm going to the Stratford Culinary School to spend 2 weeks being a writer in residence, which is going to be super cool. This summer, I was inexplicably cast to play a character loosely based on myself in a food-centric indie rom-com that was shot in Prince George.
Oh, wow.
So I went up there and did that, and then ended up being the culinary advisor on the film, and even rewrote the end of the film. So I kind of went in for a penny, in for a pound there. Coming to a television set near you sometime in 2022.
Amazing.
So, you know, every day is different, or every month is different anyway, and something new comes along, and I relish that. I encourage anybody out there who's listening who has some crazy project that they think, oh, we'd like a little bit of a different perspective on this. I'm an easy guy to track down. I'm Bob at bobblumer.com. So,
There you go. And I think that's part of the allure. I mean, looking at you from your career, it's like, yeah, you're like, it's always this interest in going through it and going this, and it's so interesting watching all that stuff. And I think that was the allure to watching you throughout this process, is that seeing you doing all these different adventures, and not only just doing them, but enthralling yourself in them, like fully going through it. It's been entertaining. That's the hugest thing. And I think it, like you said, it's been powered by the passion and you know, finding what your currency is, which, you know, obviously it's quite relevant in your case. So that's pretty awesome.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome, Bob. So they can catch you where? Your website, bobblumer.com?
bobblumer.com. On Instagram. I love to, Instagram's the only sort of social media that I use, but to me, it's, as we've been talking about, it's an art form, right? So I love, it's very much a picture tells it, you know, picture's worth 1,000 stories. What's the expression?
1,000 words.
I don't even know what it is.
1,000 words.
It's like
it could be 1,000 stories too.
There's a puzzle in the New York Times. It's called Spelling Bee, and it's basically like 7 letters, and you have to make words from them using one letter. But there's one letter in the center that you have to use in every word.
Oh, okay.
And I play it with my wife, and I'll go, I think I see a word. Sorry, we're being buzzed by a helicopter here. I think I see a word, but I don't know how to spell it. But I think the word's in there, and then I go, "How do you spell whatever?" And then she'll say, and I go, "Oh, that happens to be the pangram is the big sort of, that's when you ace it." So, anyways, I'm not so good with the specifics of spelling and or old cliches, but
well, you're writing books, cookbooks. Yes. You got to be somewhat proficient in it. So
yeah. So, anyways, my Instagram address is Bob Blumer, BOBBLUMER.
Awesome. Well, I want to truly thank you for being part of this. I do really appreciate it. If anything, it's just, you've been an interest to me, so I appreciate you letting us into a little bit of your world, how you came. I think it's a great story in that aspect, and it looks like you're still continuing on these adventures, which is awesome to watch. So,
well, thank you. I mean, it goes, you know, just to finish this off, I've had a great time talking to you. I've learned a lot from you, and it just shows that in life, another lesson to leave everyone with is to be open to everything. You know, don't say no just because for whatever reason, you think it's not something you should do or whatever. Just because some guy emails you out of the blue and says, "Hey, will you be on my podcast you've never heard of?" Don't say no.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Hey, I wouldn't be here if that didn't happen, right?
And I wouldn't be either. And I've had a great time. So I thank you.
Thank you. Thanks again, Bob. And we'll definitely talk to you soon. I'll keep you posted.
Okay,
thanks again.
Deep inside, deep down inside, you know, deep inside, it's killing me. Close your eyes and hope.